Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of TTM Talks, brought to you by TTM Motorsports, where we talk all things F1 and TTM. Joining me this week, as always, are my two lovely co-hosts, TTM Brenda.
Hello again.
And TTM Billy.
Hi there.
And this week, we have a very special guest with us. Not only is he one of the founders and owners of TTM, he's also the master of the shoey. It's TTM Taz.
Hey guys, how's it going?
This week we're going to be going over the Tier 1 season, but before that, because we've got a guest on, we're going to do a little fun activity. So Tez, you've just bought a club, and you need to fill 3 positions in this club. You need someone to manage the club, a bouncer and a DJ, but the only people you can hire are people in F1, so either drivers, higher-ups who like manage the team, like Toto Wolffs or whatever, or commentators or presenters, and you need to pick one person to be the owner of the club to like manage it, one person to be a bouncer, and one person to be a DJ.
Okay, so the DJ, I'd probably have Danny Rick. I feel like he's probably got a sort of bit of a DJ personality. He can vibe, and he's got a good sense of humour, so I feel like he'd be quite a good DJ. The person managing the club would probably be Toto Wolff. Obviously, he's had an incredible stint with Mercedes, I should say. So I feel like he could manage my club pretty well. As for the bouncer, I would probably have Gunther Steiner. I feel like he'd probably be quite a scary sort of bouncer. He's not huge, but I feel like his personality is scary enough, so he'd be my bouncer.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't try and smash the front door.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about this earlier, I was like, oh yeah, Gunther Steiner would be a good one for the bouncer. He'd have no nonsense.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't tolerate it.
And I rate the Danny Rick. I reckon he'd know the vibes of the place, and he'd be able to give everyone a good time. But anyway, before we get into our main topic of today, which is going over the Tier 1 season, we're going to touch on some real life F1 news. Not much has been happening recently, but the biggest thing is Hamilton still hasn't signed with Mercedes. There are rumours that he wants a 4-year deal for like £200 million. He wants all these bonuses, and Mercedes aren't willing to pay him, mainly because of George Russell, and they can get a cheaper deal somewhere else. So what do you guys think? Do you think Hamilton will sign? We'll get Russell in the car. We'll get a Hamilton-Russell pair in. What do you think is going on there?
I feel like it's a way to sort of hype the sort of media up a little bit more, the suspense and whatnot. Letting it go on this long, it's a huge talking point in the F1 industry. So I feel like he will sign. It's just a matter of time. I know it's very late on now. I think the whole rest of the grid's actually signed on. I think it's just his seat that's remaining. However, I just feel like it's all for the camera, all for the media, to be honest. But that's the personal preference. You say obviously about George Russell. That's a very good point. I feel like George Russell could do an exceptional job at Mercedes. He's proved that he's capable of doing it. But I know Mercedes revolve around Lewis, and I feel like they'll do whatever they can to ensure that he does stay, because obviously he's only got a few more years left in him, theoretically. So I feel they're going to want to try and make him the greatest at Mercedes. He pretty much is already, although I feel like they're going to at least want to try and get him one more championship to pass Schumacher. But that's just my opinion. I'm not too sure. What does everyone else think?
Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, personally, I'd like to see a Hamilton-Russell pairing. Just maybe, obviously, that wouldn't be next season because they're not going to be able to get rid of Bottas on his contract, especially with the trouble they're having with signing Hamilton currently, like Josh already said. But I feel that Russell could learn quite a bit from Hamilton, as well as the fact I don't think Bottas would play second fiddle to Russell and be sort of as willing to be a team player like he has against Hamilton. So I don't think I think we might have another sort of Rosberg incident sort of team if we were to have Russell and Bottas, with them both trying to compete.
Brenda, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't think Mercedes want to let Hamilton go. Obviously, he's a proven 7-time world champion. You wouldn't want to let that go. But obviously, he is asking a lot, and with the financial cuts that the teams have to make now, it is quite difficult for them to sign Lewis for another season and give him such a big contract, as well as you said, the 4-year sort of signing. They don't. I don't think they want to keep him on for that long if they are going to sign him, because obviously we saw what George Russell could do at Sakir, and Mercedes will want to put him in the seat if they think that he can do the same as Hamilton. So I'm not sure really. I think they will probably, they still will sign Hamilton for the 2021 season, even if it's only for a couple of years. And they'll want, obviously, Mercedes to go on and take that double world title again, and get Hamilton that 8th one world champion and pass Schumacher.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I see where like Tez is coming from with the whole it's publicity, and I do think it is hyped up a little bit. But I know, well, from some of the stuff that I've read, like, so Mercedes F1 is owned by, there's Daimler, Toto, and Ineos have all got like a 3-way stake in it. And I know Daimler, who are like, I think they own like the whole Mercedes car business. They're just flat out refusing his requests, and Ineos are like, well, George Russell could fit his spot, so we could get him for a much cheaper price. So I can see where that's coming from. But at the same time, if you're Hamilton and you're asking for these requests, and they're like, no, we don't think you're worth that, or we don't want to, or more precisely, they don't want to pay that, so then he starts thinking, oh, they don't think I'm worth that much. I don't know if that starts then mixing up the team vibe, being like, they don't really think I'm necessary here.
Or could it do the opposite and think, oh, maybe I need to sort of get real a bit? There's a lot more problems in the world going on at the moment, and maybe I should be taking a little bit of a pay cut. Obviously, everyone else has had to take the pay cut in the F1 industry. So, as much as I'm a huge Hamilton fan, why should he be the one that takes this silly money? He's been on silly money for so long now. Why has this got to continue? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Cause,
And he's got to love it.
yeah, the amount that he earns every year is just ridiculous. I know they obviously risk their lives racing, but he's been doing it for so many years now. You know, I know the McLaren boys last year, they took a pay cut during, I think when like lockdown 1 properly happened, they took a pay cut. So it seems a bit silly, and like someone said as well, he could easily win next year's championship. The 2022 season's up for grabs, but at least next year he could definitely win it and become the only 8-time world champion. And I feel like that's something, he says a lot that he doesn't look at records and stuff, but I feel like if you're in that position, you definitely want to be quote unquote the best.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's
yeah, and I could.
No, carry on, sorry.
Don't worry. I can say I could understand his sort of arguing over the money if it was necessary, but he's got so many other avenues of income alongside his F1 racing as well.
Yeah.
He has all his sponsorship, so.
And especially now that he's got his own Extreme E team as well, they'll start racing this year. I feel like it's not really necessary that he needs, 50 million every year. But
there's a huge Tommy partnership as well, hasn't he? So
true.
He's got his own line there. So yeah, it's not like he's lacking on money at all.
Yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see. I expect it is probably just hyped up and it will be announced that he's driving. If not, it will be an absolute madness. And, I want to see George in a front running car, but I feel like he'll have to wait till at least 2022. But anyway, that's all the real F1 news. Not much is happening in the off season. So we're going to get onto our topic for today, which is the Tier 1 Season 1. So Tez started TTM. Do you want to give us a bit of background of like why you created TTM, how it came about?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a quick rundown of how it all sort of started. So myself and Lundy, we're best mates in real life, and we both have a huge interest in motorsport and F1 particularly. And we was in a couple leagues, couldn't quite find the right league with fair stewarding and the right sort of atmosphere in a league and whatnot. And we searched around quite well, couldn't find anything, so we decided, we'll make our own league and we can run it and have it how we want it, sort of thing. Little did we know, sort of 8-9 months down the line, we'll be in the position we're at now, where it's got rather big. I must say, without sounding big-headed. I mean, it's improved. I'd like to say that for sure. Obviously, developing into an esports team, we have 5 tiers at the moment. We'll be cutting down to 4 for next season. But all it was originally to start with was to have one tier of 20 drivers who enjoy racing and can do it clean. That was all we wanted, and that would have been more than enough for us. But people started to enjoy what we was able to do with management wise. That's when we started to see a bit more of an increase in numbers of people joining, and then we started taking on staff. Obviously, the first 2 staff being yourself, Josh, and Pi Newsom, Peg, and everyone was chipping in to do their part, and it really started excelling. And then we started introducing more tiers, and before you know it, 8-9 months down the line, which feels like a lifetime ago, but really it's not that long, to be honest. We've come a real long way, and it's quite amazing now how the community's built up, and what sort of things we're looking at introducing for season 2. So yeah, that's sort of roughly how it's gone so far, but we're far from even getting started, to be honest. There's still a lot more we're ready to produce, and yeah, for the future, it's gonna lots to look forward to, for sure.
Because I remember it must have been April, May time. I think they were starting to do like the virtual GPs and stuff, and I was like, I want to get back into league racing because I've done it a bit before in previous games. I was looking around and couldn't really find anything, and then I remember I found TTM, joined it. I think I was like, I don't know, 6th or 7th member, and then
he was
getting into the mini series to sort of like sort out the drivers into season 1, and then introducing the tier 3 for North American throughout the season has been quite a journey to see where it started to where it is now.
Well, you're used to the whole lot, haven't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite amazing, really.
So looking back to the start of our tier 1 season, we obviously had the mini series before, which you had myself winning the tier 1 mini series and Brenda winning the tier 2 mini series. So we got put together in one tier, and the tier 1 is like for season 1 it was like the cleanest drivers, wasn't it? It wasn't outright fastest, it was if you're clean, which is a different way to other tiers that have done it, but I think in some ways it's better because like you can have that trust to go wheel to wheel, and it's not going to end in carnage like we've seen in tier 3 last week. But yeah, looking at the first 6 races, so we're doing the normal calendar as well, not this COVID calendar. What were your guys' thoughts going into Australia? It was a new season for all of us. What were your hopes and ambitions for it? All the way back in, I don't know, June, July.
It was around the August, I think. Was it August? July, August time? Yeah, really exciting, to be honest. The vibes were just pure excitement going into it. A lot of new drivers that have been introduced as well from the mini series as well. So it was quite a few new drivers on the playing field, and yeah, it was a lot of nerves. I remember the first few races, it was just I used to get so like nervous when the lights used to go out and whatnot, and it was just so it was so exciting and whatnot. And yeah, I think the start of the season for me was a little bit better to how it sort of ended. Well, on average. But yeah, it was really enjoyed going into the first few races for sure. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'd say the first few races, although I was on wheel, I started on a wheel that had no force feedback, and so changing from a wheel without force feedback to one with it, I felt after that my pace sort of picked up a bit, but compared to everyone else that was in the tier, it was so quick. And when you were looking at the people that you were up against, I sort of went into the tier 2 mini series. I got one podium, and I was up against the likes of Brindy Boy. There was Simba and a few others that I, to be honest, can't remember all of them.
Rice, Calmer, Stevie
Rice and
JD,
Calmer, yeah,
Small Hands.
yep, yeah. I know it wasn't anywhere near as big as what tier 1 suddenly went into. I think there was, am I right thinking about 12, 13 drivers
Yeah.
for that
Carl Duncan and
mini
Peg as
season?
well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then going into the full 20 car grid up against Brinda and Josh, who were the two sort of reigning champions for the two tiers, and then so many other quick drivers. It was definitely it was sort of a baptism by fire, I feel. I was definitely one of the back start and I felt throughout the season I picked up the pace a bit after I got my force feedback wheel, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting league or season to be part in. The speed that some of the drivers had, and yeah, it was definitely difficult.
Yeah, this is one thing that I noticed as well. Is like I know a lot of people got tired of me and Brindy winning, but you had like us at the top, and then we had sort of like a group of. I'm not even gonna say a group because it was pretty much then. There was obviously pace difference between the top of the midfield and like the bottom, but with this year's game, anything can happen, as we're going to touch on in a bit. We've all probably suffered connection issues at some point, so it was that midfield was very tight, and obviously if like one person made a mistake, it could change the whole dynamic of a race. But looking at Australia to start off with, we had neither of the two reigning champions win. We actually had Hale win. He was a Renault driver, but he left. And I remember.
That's,
yeah, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that's a strange sort of story altogether. How he sort of came in, won, and then obviously we never saw him again, did we? Which is really strange. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Because I remember that race. It was really annoying because I could have won, and then there was a safety car, and I forgot that you couldn't overtake before the start finish line. So I started overtaking and then had to back off, which then let both Hale and Brindy through. And then I made a mistake later on and spun on the turn 1 curb. And I was like, oh no, this isn't a good way to start the season. But then we had Hale win, Brindy second, and then myself third. And then coming into Bahrain, it was obviously a real shame that Hale didn't continue because, he could have been fine for the championship, who knows. But Bahrain, I feel like it's the first proper circuit you can tell where people's pace is at. And we had Brinda win. It was a good showing from the Red Bull guys as well, getting a 1-2 quali even. How did that race go for you, Brinda?
Quite honestly, I think it was lucky. I remember that race. I was running second the whole time until the leader unfortunately disconnected and started to drop back, which was a huge stroke of luck for me, and I managed to take the lead. And I think your AI pitted you once,
Yep, and then I
and then
pitted
when you
again.
came back, yeah, you pitted again. So I had a huge gap after that. And yeah, it was just kind of lucky really that I got that win. I don't think I should have. I definitely wasn't the fastest person on the track.
And here's the best bit about it as
So
well. So I came into pit for no, my AI pitted for mediums, and I only had 2 sets of mediums. And before I pitted, I was on mediums. So when I came back into the pits, they put on the old mediums. so I basically did.
I didn't know that.
I basically did what the whole well, apart from the first like 5 laps on the same set of mediums, which was great. Um, but yeah, how did you two find Bahrain? Because I feel like Australia's a bit of a mixed up track. It's not. It's like a street circuit, not a street circuit. Bahrain's probably a better show of where your pace is at.
Well, my Bahrain didn't go particularly well, to be honest. I sort of made, I say clip of the race, but not in a good way, because of the way that I lost the car. I know it's still floating around with one of the drivers. He likes that clip and to bring it up occasionally. I sort of lost the rear through turn, I believe it's turn 6 to 7. The sort these
The
I'll
like
describe
downhill
where it is on the
chicane
track.
thing.
The downhill chicane before the slow corner to the mini straight before the third DRS zone. The third DRS zone, sort of there. I lost the rear there, sort of half caught it, and then as slowing down for the slow corner before the mini straight, then lost it again and sort of ploughed straight into a barrier at an angle that didn't look possible, which I believe brought out a safety right when I believe most people had just pitted, so it didn't actually benefit a lot of people, but it might have really benefited a few if they were still running on tips. So yeah, I don't really have much to talk about Bahrain other than going headfirst into a wall.
But then we moved on to Vietnam, which it was wet to dry, and as we all soon found out, the pad in the wet is just good. Um, so whenever it's a wet race, I tended to do quite well. But I know Tez in particular, you love Vietnam, don't you?
No, I'm a fan of Vietnam. Not many are, but I do quite like Vietnam. Very complex track. It's got a bit of everything there. My race there, to be fair, didn't go too bad. The wet conditions favoured me a little bit more. I found it was a lot less likely to take damage in the rain because you're not going as fast, especially through like sector 3. It was really easy to pick up damage through there and like use slicks. But managing to make up 8 positions after starting P14 wasn't a bad race for me, to be fair. So yeah, I quite enjoyed Vietnam. It was a good race, to be fair. Good track.
And you even finished ahead of Brinder, not having one of his best races. Is it that you don't like the track, Brinder, or is it other circumstances that happened that sort of hindered your race?
I just had a complete nightmare. I'm not gonna lie. It as you say, it started off wet, and we were on full wet tires to start, and I was third, and I was just dropping back, and obviously I think it was Rice who was in second, and you two just flew up the road, and I could not catch, so um, I sort of settled for third at that point, but my wet started overheating quite badly. So I dived in the pits for inters, sort of like a strategic possible gain. And then a safety car came out, and everyone ahead of me pitted, and I was really far down the field. And in sort of a bit of desperation, I guess, trying to get back up the field, I spun it and just completely lost it. And then I picked up damage. I had a few collisions. It was just a bad race. I don't think it was the track. I think it was the fact that I got a little bit screwed over with the safety car and was just trying to make it back up and not lose too much. But in the end, I lost all of it.
Yeah, that can be sometimes be the way where you make one mistake or something happens and then it just sort of keeps rolling and you get that negative effect, just keep rolling and rolling. But I remember we saw quite a good final lap battle for the podium. There was Rice, Smithy, and there was, I can't remember who the third driver was, but they were having a right little battle through the final sector, the sort of sweeping lefts and rights on the last lap to determine the podium, which was Rice, who actually got his second podium on the bounce. And then we moved on to China, which was a pretty bad race. Thanks, Codemasters, for the good servers, because it was going well, and then everyone sort of disconnected from each other. So we had to take the result from halfway through, which I know I was quite annoyed about, because I felt like me and Brindy was going to have a mental battle that kind of got taken away. But you can't really do a lot with when Codemasters does you like that. So Brenda went on to win, and then we had Hopi. Yeah, Hopi coming through in second, and Michael coming third, which was a good race for him. After the first few races, he scored 4 points in Australia, and then missed Bahrain and DNF'd at Vietnam, so good way to bounce back for him. And then we have Tez scoring 12 points, doing bits around Bahrain, China even.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad race, to be fair. Obviously, the likes of a couple of people having problems with connections and whatnot did help in my circumstances. Wasn't really that pleased with it. Obviously, didn't really feel that deserved. However, I had enough of my own connection problems throughout the season anyway, so I'll take it, But that was the last time we used a formation lap. As we found out, the formation lap in F1 2020 does glitch out lobbies. We will be trialing that again now, as we've now finished the season. We'll be trying that in a little mini tournament we're doing, see if the formation laps are still bugging up the races or not. But I feel like that was probably the main reason why yourself and a few other drivers had problems with connection. But we didn't use formation laps for the rest of the season due to that.
That's alright. On this year's game, you'll have to pay to get the glitches fixed. So we move on to Netherlands, which was rain affected again. We had quite a few races this season that were rain affected, and you had myself winning from Brenda, and then we had an absolute madness with Carl Duncan. I think he stayed out on, I can't remember if we were on Inters at this point, but stayed out really long on them, and then a safety car came out, and he was able to jump up into P3, and because it's so hard to overtake it, Zandvoort, he managed to bring it home. And we're going to come onto it later as well, but I think that's one of the drives of the season.
Yeah, it was certainly making up 13 positions. That was unreal. So we know Carl is a fan of the wet, but I think even he was surprised by that sort of performance. It was really, really impressive.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to touch on as well, now that we've gone through the 2 new tracks this season, what are your guys' thoughts on them? Do you like them, dislike them? Obviously, we know with Tez you like Vietnam, but what's the overall consensus on them?
Personally, I like. Carry on. There you go for it, Billy.
I like Netherlands. I think Vietnam should be removed from the calendar, which luckily it has been in real F1, because that means we won't have to race it in the new game. It's my least favourite track alongside Singapore.
Why is that? Is it just because it's so narrow and tight? Some of the corners at Vietnam are very, I don't know what the word is, off-putting, because like you want to get on the power but you just can't. You just got to feather the throttle around.
See, I wouldn't necessarily, because it's so tight now, because I don't mind Monaco as a track. Singapore, I did quite well in, for me anyway, this season. And I don't mind the track as a whole. It's just it doesn't really suit my driving style. I never seem to be able to qualify that high. In fact, I think I was back 3 for majority of the races, and then I tend to make up places. And I think my most common finishing position was P12. I tend to make up positions in the race, and just find that those 2 tracks were just horrible to try and do that at.
What about your feelings on Netherlands, Taz? What do you think of the track on a whole?
I mean, obviously, you know about Vietnam. Really like Vietnam, and to be fair, I really like Holland as well. Really, really nice track. Got a really nice flow to it, and it's really easy to sort of make a mistake. It's really hard to get back into that flow. But that was the first time I ever got a front row grid position qualifying ever in league racing. So that one I was pretty happy with that one, starting just alongside yourself. So yeah, it was good going into the race. However, obviously with the wet, that's when I was really not confident with wet weather. Just turning off traction control that season as well. So obviously that's only round 5. So by that point, I only just about knew how to race with in the dry, let alone no traction control in the wet. So yeah, sort of went downhill from the front row. However, managed to pick up points still. I do like the track though, for sure.
And Brenda, what are your thoughts on both of them?
I think Vietnam, the sort of general feeling towards it is that it's not really liked. I don't think it's a bad track. I think it just has a lot of sort of flow to it. You need to be on the racing line constantly to get a good lap. And if you're not, then you kind of have to let off and like try and drift back to it. And obviously once you get, it's a bit like Monaco in that respect, is that you have to have the perfect line throughout the entire lap to get a good one in. And once you do get that, it's very satisfying to have. So I think, yeah, it is a nice track. You just got to get it sort of right every time, which is really difficult to do. Same reason why people don't really like Monaco. But yeah, the Netherlands, again, a lot about flow, very fast, very nice track. I think Netherlands probably my favourite out of the two. I think just because of the sheer speed of it, you're constantly sort of, like the long banked right-handers and stuff like that. It's just very different to sort of the rest of the calendar.
Yeah, I agree with Netherlands. I remember the first time I ever drove it, and normally I don't feel like you really get that sense of speed, but I remember going up the hill, and I was like, I don't know whether it was because it's an old school track, it's obviously quite narrow, but I was like, this feels fast.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, Netherlands is good. Vietnam, it's I like the last sector a lot because it's got sort of like the S's at Japan sort of vibe, but then the rest of the track I don't really like. Like I don't I'm decent at driving it, but like turn 1 is just too tight, and there are just so many corners where you're like you can't get on the power. You're just having to wait and wait and wait, and it's just quite frustrating. But luckily, with next year's game, hopefully, because we're going to Imola, I'm excited to drive Imola. But moving on to,
Do you think they'll have that on the game?
I hope so. I really do.
I would have thought so. If it's confirmed for next season, it should definitely be on there. Quite like Vietnam was confirmed this season, so they made Vietnam track for us. Although they didn't end up going there because of COVID and whatnot, it should 100% be on the calendar next season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to be fair, they've got. I know, obviously, the game's a few years old, but it was on F1 2013, so they could just revamp it from there. I mean, my dream for the next year's game is that they do like a COVID special, and they include all the new tracks that we went to this year. But I think that's pushing it a little bit. But I definitely think we'll get Imola.
Yeah, I'd like to race on Turkey.
Yeah, I think Turkey would be good, and Mugello as well. I think Mugello would be an insane lap to drive in an F1 car.
Yeah, a Nürburgring. Nürburgring would be another one.
So not that they're listening, but Codemasters, if you are, get those tracks in. But anyway, moving back.
Pay extra.
What do you say?
You probably have to pay extra.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, DLCs.
Moving on to our 6th round, we went off to Spain, which I know for me, Brenda and Taz, we had quite an exciting Spain. starting off, I can't remember if I was pole or I was second. Going into turn
You
one,
started second,
yeah, I thought I did.
and Brendan was on pole.
But on pad, I was able to get a better start, and then coming into turn one, the first time it happened quite a few times. I had connection issues, so like my game would just sort of freeze. Everyone else would continue, but I'd just be stuck in one spot, and then it would unfreeze, and then it would freeze again. And it did it about a solid 5 times. So I went from first to last in 3 corners. So from then, I thought the race was over. And I believe Brindy and Tez were having a good old race up at the front.
You go for it,
Yeah, he started on the mediums, I think, and I started on soft, so I was on a different strategy, and he managed to get like an almighty gap just from doing the one stop.
Yeah, I was well aware that the mediums was the better tire to start on. I think myself and Michael being the only two to start on the mediums, and getting a decent lap in on the mediums, managed to start in P5. I was pretty happy with that one. And then it was a case of just sort of waiting for the soft runners to start slowing down a bit as they were sort of around like lap 10 or so. And I think I stayed up to about lap 15. And then the race sort of started playing into my hands. And it was looking good. I sort of led most of the race. And it wasn't until the safety car came out then everything changed. Obviously I was trying to go to the mediums to the hards. But then obviously we had the pit stops. But Josh, I'll let you carry on if you like.
Yeah, so at this point I think I'd managed to get back up to 4th. And we had a safety car come out. It was probably around lap 22, 23. So pretty much everyone came into the pits, and Brenda and Tess put on soft tyres. I put on mediums because there was still 7 odd laps to go. And then when the safety car came in, you two sort of bolted away for a little bit for like 2 or 3 laps. I think the gap was like 2.5 seconds, but then your tyres started to go off. And I think this is probably the best race I've ever had, going from last to then. I made quite a good move on Brindy around the outside, and then on the penultimate lap passing Tez, to then go on and win the race. But obviously I feel really bad because without the safety car, I would have been 4th, and Tez probably would have won.
It's how the cookie crumbles. It is what it is. You drove an incredible race. I got voted driver of the day, but I don't feel that's really fair. As you said, that was probably your best ever drive, and I can't not agree with that. You know, you drove incredible that race.
But you did pick up a podium, which obviously is great. There was kind of a meme going around. I can't remember the meme of like the guy who's really celebrating on the podium, but it's only for 3rd. That's kind of like been the meme of the season.
I mean, it was second, but yeah, it was a meme.
Yeah, second. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Let's get that
not to discredit you at all. Not to discredit you at all.
Well, it was my first ever league podium, so it was pretty big for me, you know. But yeah, it wasn't quite the win, but my time's still yet to shine.
And then we went off to Monaco, which is Brenda's hunting ground. He's just insane around there. Talk us through your race around Monaco, Brenda.
It was pretty eventful from what I remember. Obviously, I kind of noticed that you're a bit off the pace, obviously because it's Monaco and
Thanks, Pad.
Monaco's more of a wheel track, so I think I kind of had it a little bit from the start. But obviously we had something stupid like 4 safety cars and like 3 virtual safety cars or something. Which meant every time I was about to pull a gap, I couldn't, and it would just be reduced back to nothing. So I had to do so many restarts, and then once I did finally get away, I managed to pick up damage, which then allowed, I think it was Michael, to jump all over the back of my gearbox and just pressure me. but I managed to hold him off for about 10 laps. There's a bit of a collision towards the end, as he tried to go around the outside of turn 1, which I was very shocked about. I wasn't expecting him to go for anything. But yeah, it ended up in a collision. But yeah, I managed to keep the win, and it was a good. I think it was a good drive considering all the safety cars and things like that. So I was quite happy with it.
And to move on to Mr. Chew Billy picking up the first points of the season, which talk us through your race, because I mean I know you were on wheel. Had you switched to the force feedback wheel yet?
That was my first race with the force feedback wheel. So I actually no, Spain might have been my first race with a force feedback wheel because I was battling with you in that race in a bit for Spain when you went through the pack.
Yeah, so how did your Monaco race go? Because obviously, as Brenda said, there was loads of safety cars, virtual safety cars, and I mean, Monaco's not the easiest track to drive, even if you're on a wheel. But to pick up your first points there, you know, that's a brilliant achievement.
Yeah, yeah. I was running in 6th place, and then with 2 laps to go, I lost it and then had to pit. So it was sort of bittersweet Monaco for me. I got my first points, but there was definitely the possibility of me getting more if I hadn't made a silly mistake. It was final corner or second to last corner, right where the pit lane entry is. And coming out of that corner, I just put a bit too much throttle down, spun it right round, and took my wing off on the entrance to the pit lane. So it was bittersweet, but yeah, it was nice to get my first points off the season and sort of get off the mark.
I mean, credit to you though, if you even had to make an extra pit stop towards the end of the race, to not drop out the points is, you must have been doing pretty well up until then. So it's nothing to knock. Tess, how did your Monaco go?
My Monaco race. I mean, I struggle in Monaco anyway, so didn't really have my hopes that high going into it. Started just outside the top 10, started P11. So I had sort of the option for tyres and whatnot. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I started on the mediums and then took damage on first lap. So already it was not looking good. But I did manage to make positions by the end of the race. I did make 3 positions and finished P8, taking 4 points. So I mean, for a track that I really don't like, I was happy to take points.
Yeah, and I know one of the top moments of this season was your drift through the final corner and qualifying. That's always going to stick out as a Monaco memory for me.
As Jerry would say, what a slide.
Yeah, that classic Jerry quote. But yeah, looking at the championship fight up until now, I feel like it was very even. Me and Brindy were both on 3 wins at this point. But then I feel like the next race is where sort of the championship turned. We went off to Baku, which, I mean, is it a sore point to touch on, Brinda, what happened in the race?
Everything happened in the race. I mean, the season's over now, so I mean, I can't really do anything about it. I think at that point, before that race, I was actually leading the championship, or I can't remember, to be quite honest, but I know very close at least, if I wasn't. But yeah, I was kind of, I put in a lot of practice to get it right, and I decided to start and go for a 1-stop. But it was one of the first races where we stopped the formation lap, and the tires were just really cold, and I just couldn't get any grip down, and ended up losing my front wing through the castle section, and then binning it completely a couple of corners later, all on the first lap, which I wasn't very happy with. But I think, afterwards it's kind of just frustration with yourself about what's happened. But that and that's it. And all of us have felt that frustration. You've been like, you're in a good position, and then you just all by yourself, you just completely ruin it. And it's gutting, but as I say, you can't do anything about it. So you just got to try and look forward to the next race.
Yeah, as you say that, the PTSD from Monaco and the esports is just triggered in my head. Which, if you don't know, we were at an esports event. I don't like Monaco, but I was doing really well, and then I just binned it all by myself, and I was fuming. I've never been so angry with myself in my life.
I remember that so well.
Yeah, well, but we move. I remember
Still top the group though, so we dubbed it. It's no big deal.
So I remember that qualifying as well in Baku. It was really tight between me and Hopi. Hopi ended up coming 5th, I believe, and we had Michael and Pars on the podium with me. So great race from Pars. I think it was only his 4th race. So great result from the Haas driver. And then we went off onto Canada, which I know Tez had a good move round the outside of Smithy. And I know it was another bad race for you, Brenda. Do you want to talk us through what happened at Canada?
Yeah, so I think Baku kind of started a bad string of races for me. Canada, I think I was, in quali at least, I know I was quickest. And I was pulling away at the start of the race until pit stops. And for anyone that doesn't know, Canada is usually a 2-stop, soft, medium, medium. And on my first run of pit stops, I got put onto another set of softs, which I was not expecting at all. And then I was as to what had happened, but sort of tried to live with it, carried on another set of softs, and then went to the hards, which were awful and just did not work for me at all. And I ended up losing not only first but second as well. And what actually happened was, before the race, with the setups and the strategy screen, is that the game had selected the 3-stop, which was soft, 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 medium, instead of the soft, medium, medium strategy, which I was going to do. So I didn't realize that this had happened. As a result, it put me on soft. So yeah, again, not very happy with what had happened, but also it taught me to be a bit more careful when going into the race, and just to sort of look over things and double check what you're going to do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. At least, if there is a mistake made, you can learn from it. What about Billy and Tez? How did your Canada races go?
For Canada, to be honest, it was a race to forget for me. It sort of started quite well. I made up a few positions, and then I believe I took contact off someone when they braked a bit earlier than I was expecting, and lost my front wing, and sort of lost the positions that I'd made up, and then just dropped back the grid.
For me, making up 4 positions, I quite like Canada. Just didn't really have the pace compared to the other drivers. Shout out to our new drivers that race as well. We had Dave and Jagerbomb. That was their debut in TTM.
And Curry as well. Curry started that race as well.
Oh, was it Curry? My bad. Yeah. They all done really well. All finished in the points. I was actually sandwiched by Jaeger and Dave. I had a really, really good battle with Dave throughout most of the race, to be honest. So yeah, it was good. Jagerbomb as well. It was his first ever multiplayer season. He's done really well throughout the whole season, and even on the first race, picking up 6 points in Canada. So yeah, making up 10 positions, in fact. So yeah, that was a really good drive from him.
Yeah, I was going to mention about the new drivers. All of them have had, even though they started, eight races in, they all had immense seasons, being able to catch up. And yeah, just well done to all of them. I don't know. Dave then got podiums later on in the season as well, which is obviously great. But moving on to
So did Jaeger.
And so did Jaeger. Yeah, my bad. But moving on to France, me and Brenda had one of the best, I don't know whether to say battles or races I know I've ever had, and we've talked about it before. Pretty much from lap 1 till, I don't know, lap 25, we were battling every lap.
Yeah, I think it was the most matched throughout the entire season that we've ever been, in terms of pace. We both sort of knew the better strategy, starting on the mediums. And yeah, as you say, we just battled from the start right up until the end. And I think the final gap between us was about half a second, which is crazy.
Yeah, I know I've never had a battle quite like that. It was just insane, the amount that we were just swapping positions, going round. I know we had like one lap where we went round the final sector pretty much side by side. So absolute scenes there. What about your guys, France? Because I feel like France was like, well, pretty much most races are decent, but like Spain, it was one of those. This is a good race.
Yeah, for me, unfortunately, it was another case of I was out of the points, sort of out. I wouldn't say back of the grid, sort of thing. I think I finished 13th in that, in amongst a few other drivers, and it's just France isn't a good track for me really, and I just messed it up.
What about Tez? How did your France go?
Sorry, Mike just had a bit of a moment there. France, that was an enjoyable race, to be honest. This is when I sort of go for my good streak of results. I say good streak, consistent streaks. Finishing P6, again moving up 4 positions. But that was actually one of my most favourite races to race alongside Lundy. Obviously, there's a huge sort of like rivalry between us because we're best mates and whatnot. But we actually had probably our best ever battle at France, and we spent a majority of the race together battling, and it was really, really good between us. And yeah, big shout out to Lundy who ended up finishing 4th, narrowly missing out on that podium, and that was his best result as well. He's had a very consistent season. Unfortunately, not picking up any sort of driver of the days, fastest laps, podiums, nothing like that. Obviously, you can see on the standings, he's got like no colourful numbers next to his name, but he's had such a consistent season, bringing in the points. But his season was quite slept on. But we know he's a very talented driver, picking up multiple podiums in the mini series. But just keeping it very consistent this season for him.
Yeah, like you say, it's a shame when normally most races there'll be like one standout driver, but when you're consistently being that, not standout, but you're doing the job week in, week out, you can kind of fly under the radar a little bit, which is a shame. But I mean, he helped Brenda win the Constructors' Championship, so at least he's got something to show for his work. And now moving on to Austria, which maybe saw one of the best celebrations I've ever seen for getting pole. Tez started on pole on the front row with, I believe, Ali Star, who was a new joiner for that weekend. How did your race go, Tez, from starting on pole? I know not the way that you wanted, but still amazing to get that pole position.
The pole was over-celebrated purely because I didn't think I had that in me. Doing a lot of time trial before, I was probably about, I think, like 3-4 tenths off the time I did in the qualifying. Pretty much nailed the lap. I think I got 13 point. No, sorry, 103.1. I think I got. Yeah, I was miles off that time trial. I don't know where it came from, but that's why there was a huge celebration. But that's my second front row of the season. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Started the race, led for a few laps, and then me and Alistair tangled up going into turn one, maybe sort of 7-8 laps in or so. And then that allowed you and Brindy to just shoot straight past us, caught us lacking. And then it sort of went downhill from there. I was battling with Michael at one stage. He got past me, and I wasn't really happy with that. Rather than trying to just sort of stick with him, I was trying to push too hard. And then the famous turn one exit, which I was doubting so much going into the race. I knew something bad was going to happen on it, which it did. And then, didn't score any points after all that. And yeah, what was a really good podium? What was a really good pole position turned into a really bad race result. And like they say, you don't score points on Saturdays. And yeah, I really felt that one.
Yeah, I remember before the race, you were messaging me like, Josh, how do you not spin on the exit curve? I'll try my best to help out. But yeah, that exit curve that whole turn one is just horrible, especially in time trial, or not even in time trial, in normal races. It loves to shine that light on the braking zone, so you can't see where you're braking, and it's just horrible.
Yeah, I know that as well. Yeah, that turn one entry is terrible when it's bright. That's for sure.
So looking back at the top, Baku to sort of Austria was sort of a good run for me, and then we come into Britain, which was a wet race. So on paper, should have been another good one for me, but we have Brinda pulling off a masterpiece.
Yeah, I remember that, and it was probably, I think that's got to go down as one of my best drives this season. Not because of the actual sort of race itself, but sort of I'd been on a bad string of races. I hadn't picked up a win since Monaco, and obviously you'd taken quite a charge in the championship since then, and it was kind of it meant a lot to me, to be honest, that race, especially as it was wet. We knew that you were sort of the king of the wet, and I managed to sort of outsmart you a little bit with this strategy. For anyone who doesn't know, I managed to go the whole race on, I think, one set of wets, didn't pit at all, and managed to bring it home on like 70% worn wet tyres whilst you pitted. And to be fair, I just want to say that you managed to bring it down like 17 seconds in like 13 laps or something, which is an insane gap to pull down. But you know, a couple more laps and you definitely would have got me. But luckily, the race ended just in time that I was still ahead.
Yeah, excellent strategy by you not to pit. When I came into pit early and I was like, or not even early, it was sort of on the pit window, and you stayed out. I was like, okay, maybe you're staying out for one lap, and then you just kept staying out, and I was like, oh, he's just not gonna stop. I see how it is. So then it took me a few laps to realise, oh, I've got to fully go for it now. And it was just quali lap after quali lap trying to catch up. But in the end, wasn't enough, and you pulled off a brilliant strategy to win.
I was very happy.
Yeah, I was in the party with Brinda when he won that race, and he was very happy with it, to say the least. The celebrations were quite loud through the mic. It's one to remember, that's for sure.
And one of the other famous TTM memes that happened from Britain was Carl Duncan being a turnip. Tez, do you want to talk us through what happened?
Oh,
interesting terminology used for sure. Just sort of, that was the first thing that came out of my mouth. Don't know why I called him a turnip, although he is one. What happened was arguably my best move of the whole season. Being really, really wet, I managed to go side by side with Carl Duncan going around the Maggots and Beckett section, followed him for quite a few laps before, and I thought, I noticed sort of coming into Maggots, he was a lot slower than me, so I thought I'm gonna risk it all, and held it around the outside really nicely, managed to get ahead, and then coming down the back straight, I don't really know what he'd done, to be honest, but we ended up making contact from his front wing and my rear tire, and luckily somehow I didn't DNF. I don't know how I didn't DNF, but yeah, there were some interesting phrases used when that happened, but I feel like I could have had a really good result from that. However, again, that's how the cookie crumbles. It's motorsport. Accidents happen, and yeah, we move.
Yeah, going on to what you said, there were some interesting phrases. That was sort of a common feature throughout the season, wasn't it? We knew that the second that there was a slight spin for you or anything like that, everyone went straight to your Twitch channel to sort of look for the best of Tez moments.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a meme, but with when it comes to online racing, obviously especially F1, I do take it very seriously. Obviously, doing karting for so many years as well, it's the closest thing to doing it really without doing it as such. So it's very competitive, and when things don't go my way, the emotions definitely do come out, and people have noticed that, and they seem to find the funny side of it. However, I don't. Others do. So at least I'm entertaining someone out there.
I wasn't even necessarily referring just to when things happened to you. A highlight for me was that time that I got taken out with you directly in front of me.
Oh, what with that was, what track was that at?
Japan.
It was you in Japan. That was it. You and Smithy, wasn't it? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah, that was another interesting phrase for him then too. But we won't go into the specifics.
I say bring out the test rage compilation. When's that coming to TTM?
I mean, I'd love to. However, I haven't got all of them saved anymore, and obviously Twitch deletes the last 2 weeks. I've got a few still, but yeah, there is quite a lot that has gone missing. Although to be fair, I think to be fair though, it is probably all there somewhere, because majority of it got clipped by someone, whether it was me or someone else. Someone clipped it and chucked it in the Discord. So I'm sure if you look for my clips, anyone listening to the podcast right now, you could probably go find all sorts. So yeah, that's what you want to do, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, to be fair, you said about obviously it is a game, but we do take it quite seriously. We've all been there where something's happened and we've just been fuming. Like we'll touch on it in a bit, but for the last 2 races I transferred to wheel from being on paddle season, and they weren't the 2 easiest of races, and at Brazil especially I ended up binning it, and I was fuming. I was supposed to FaceTime my friends afterwards, and I just didn't reply to them because I was like, nah, I'm too annoyed at myself to do anything. And I just like sat there for like a good hour just being like, I'm an idiot, why did I do that? But anyway, we move on to Hungary and Belgium. I'm going to group these 2 together because after 2 races have been in TTM, we had Ali Star winning both of them. Obviously Hungary, it was wet again, and although it might have seemed like easier race for me, I ended up making a mistake on the start, putting the power down too early, which dropped me down the field, and then I fought my way back up to I think second before getting hit by connection issues and dropping all the way back down. And I remember after my second trip down the field, on the way back up I met a certain Brinder boy stuck behind my teammate.
Yeah, good old Curry, eh?
Yeah, one
Doing
thing
his
that Curry
usual-
was great at this season was not being a train, but being very, very good at defending and keeping cars behind him.
Yeah, I agree. Very good at it. I think that's his sort of. If you ask anyone, that's kind of his his trademark thing is that he can be very difficult to get past. And yeah, that race especially was very difficult to get past him, and I ended up I was stuck behind him, I think, for almost the whole race until it sort of turned dry at the end. Obviously, nothing wrong with what he did. It was completely legal. Like, he was just defending really well, and I just physically couldn't get past. So, yeah, that was a difficult race for me. A chance to sort of bring back the championship a little bit and give it a bit more of a fight, and I kind of messed it up. It was also the first race of the season where I started to think about turning off traction control. I did a lot of practice without it, but instead it took me another, what's that, four races to turn it off completely. So yeah.
And then also looking at Belgium, Ali Starr then took up another victory. I think Brenda was way out ahead, and then we had a safety car towards the end of the race, and I think it was Brenda, me, then Ali. And I think both of us two had penalties, which then meant because we only had like 2 laps left, we couldn't pull a gap, and Alice went on to win that race too. Another honourable mention is Dave picked up second in Hungary and third in Belgium, so his first podiums in TTM as well.
You quite look at that race, and you could almost refer it to in real life F1, the Monza race we had this year. It was such a unexpected podium. It was really sort of refreshing to see as well. Obviously, no disrespect to you and Brindy, but you guys were always the stars of the show. It was really good to sort of see some different drivers up on the podium. Obviously, Josh, you taking third place. However, the top 2 steps were occupied by 2 brand new drivers. So it was refreshing to see for everyone. I think everyone kind of liked that. And that's what I compare it to would be Monza 2020.
Yeah, I totally agree. I spend time in real life just being like, I hate Mercedes. Why are they so far ahead? Why can't the other teams be better? Why is it always, Hamilton, Bottas? And then in game, or in this season at least, it's just everyone else just felt that way. It's always Josh and Brenda at the top. So it was definitely refreshing to see new people win, new people on the podium. And yeah, how did Belgium and Hungary go for you guys?
Belgium and Hungary were still in my very long dry spell for scoring points. There was sort of mid-season where I'm looking at it at the moment, and I went 7 points without 7 races without scoring a point. After Azerbaijan was my final points before we got to the Singapore Grand Prix. So it was a lot of sort of midfield battles that sort of meant I was missing out on points by 1 or 2 places. So it was quite frustrating, that sort of stage of the season for me.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's not even if like you could be running the top 10 as well and then get a penalty, and because everything's so close, it then drops you down the field.
Yeah, start of the season, I'd say penalties were definitely my downfall. I was picking up a lot of penalties at the start. I only really started playing the game in April, end of April, when we had first lockdown in the UK, and sort of just started playing it for fun, and then met Brenda, and then it sort of went from there. So I was still definitely in the learning stages of the game, and then after getting a force feedback wheel, slowly improved my racecraft a bit and sort of whittled down the amount of penalties I was getting per race, which definitely started to improve my positions, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough to get me consistently scoring points.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is, because I didn't realise that you hadn't really played F1 before, so you've had like a mega season, your first ever like online season, and it didn't help with like Jaeger, Curry, Dave, Ali, all joined in mid-season. They were quick drivers who then also slot into that midfield, and then even if you've been on this upward trajectory, it doesn't always show, if you get me, because there are those people who have joined and run maybe a little bit quicker, so have taken those sort of spots away from you.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I'm really looking forward to season 2, because I believe it's going to be a lot more based on sort of skill mixed with cleanness, opposed to just that one aspect of it. However, that is my one bragging point throughout the whole season, going for the entire season without picking up a single penalty point on my license. That's my sort of silver lining for it all.
Yeah, I mean, incredible to keep it clean, and obviously that's what Tier 1 was in Season 1. It's you can be the cleanest, and it's true, but you can be the cleanest.
I'll win something.
And then moving on to Italy, which is kind of like I'm going to say the end of the mid-season. We had a mega fight at the front between myself, Brenda, and Hopi. I remember it was pretty much a DRS train for the whole race. How did you find that race, Brenda?
Super difficult, not gonna lie. I think slightly lower wings than I was. I was very quick in the corners, but just not fast enough on the straights to make any kind of move. And obviously sat in the dirty air quite a lot. It was difficult to keep up. I think I made one move throughout the entire race. Yeah, it was just a difficult race. To be quite honest, I don't know. I think my final lap in quali. I got what was it? I think there was someone like sat in the middle of the corner. Like they obviously didn't mean to, and they were just wrong place, wrong time. But it kind of messed up my lap, and I wasn't able to go for pole. Which was a bit frustrating, but I don't know. I think my quali pace compared to my race pace, my quali has always been a lot quicker than my race pace. So who knows?
And then we also had Tez being another little bit of a meme after telling everyone not to spin it on a Ascari. Ended up spinning it on a Ascari, which obviously at the time is very frustrating, but it was also kind of funny.
I really hope you weren't going to bring this up. Yeah, not ideal. I obviously Tier 1 being... Yeah, I thought you weren't going to bring that up either. Yeah, it was twice. That was definitely the worst race of the season. Spent a lot of time sort of preaching to people in race briefs how to be taking a Ascari. However, I couldn't do it in qualifying or the race. The race went actually really sort of well to start with. Anyway, obviously, we all know what happened at the end. Starting on the mediums, obviously starting at the back of the grid, I was up in a really, really good sort of fighting position for maybe like top 5. I think it would be a bit rich to say maybe a podium, but at least top 5 I could have been battling for. Safety car came out, and I was sort of looking through my MFD, deciding what's best to do, and just sort of drove through Ascari and clipped the curb. Wasn't going that fast, and it just threw me straight into a wall. But yeah, let's move on from that.
Yeah, like you say, moving on to Singapore. Better times for a lot of drivers. We had Brenda coming through to take the win. I had connection issues between quali and the race, so dropped to the back of the pack. Ended up coming second though, which was still quite a good result. We had Billy getting points, ending his sort of drought period. And Tez, I know there was an incident at the start of the race with another driver who's no longer in the league, but still, pretty decent race to score points, I believe.
Well, I mean, yeah, I did score points. However, I was in a really, really good position to do better. Obviously, the incident on lap 1 happened, which set me back, and then I lost connection for a good 8-9 laps maybe. So I just ended up just sort of sitting back, just chilling, Well, I say chilling. I was pretty infuriated. Eating an ice cream and managed to get back in. And then the battle was really on. I see a lot of drivers around me had a lot of penalties. I had no penalties. The game put me on the softs, so it was just a case of just need to get on with it now and push. I think I finished P9 maybe or something. I can't quite remember, to be honest, but it could have been a lot better. I really did put a lot of work into Singapore, so it was gutting to have one of my multiple connection issues of the season.
Yeah, and obviously a bit gutting getting taken out at the start, but still scoring points. I know there were quite a few safety cars in that race, but managing to bring it back and get some points is still something to be proud of. Billy, how did that race go for you?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Like as I mentioned, sort of earlier on in the podcast, it's not one of my favourite tracks at all. But it does seem that street tracks seem to work quite well for me. Other than Vietnam, I scored points in all three of the street tracks. Vietnam, obviously, the wet weather, and I caught a barrier and DNF'd quite early on in traffic. But yeah, it was definitely interesting. I think the amount of disconnections that people, I say, suffered sort of helped me with that position. I think I started something like 16th for that race and then ended up getting up to 10th. I know I went through at least 3 drivers that were ghosted due to connection problems, though, I'd say in the final 10 laps. So if it wasn't for the server errors and stuff like that, I wouldn't have had that position. So it's sort of a 50-50. I managed to keep it together and I didn't take any wing damage or have to do extra pit stops for the entire race. But on out and out pace, I don't think I would have got there if it wasn't for disconnections from other people.
Yeah, but still, great. Because obviously it's difficult around Singapore to get penalties, clip a wall. So you still have the sense of mind not to do that. And like Tesla said before, it's the way the cookie crumbles. Some people disconnect, some people don't.
Yeah.
And at least we were there to capitalise on the opportunity. And we had Brenda, I'm going to say, taking one of your easier wins.
One of my favourite wins, I think, just because Singapore has been a track that I'm kind of in tune with, I guess. I'm sort of really consistent at it and able to put in decent laps over and over and over again. But yeah, it was a bit sort of, I guess hollow a little bit because obviously a lot of people disconnecting and yourself having connection issues at the start. I managed to, although to be fair, I managed to put myself onto the one-stop strategy with the rest of the guys who were also going for that, using a safety car to my advantage to get on the hards and just go to the end, which was quite good. And yeah, I think biggest gap of the season for me, with the win. So yeah, I was quite happy with it. A lot of people, I don't think, were, because a lot of people got booted, but I was quite happy with what had happened.
I think out of all people, I think Dave was probably the most infuriated by it. I think he would have had a really good battle with you, Brindy. Looking at his average times and whatnot he was setting, and he felt like he could have been a contender for that top position. Obviously, he got lagged out and he was racing in a complete different lobby, not really realizing what was going on until after the race. You both having complete different results, but like we said before, it's one of them things we've all had to get used to it. We continue to play the game, so that's our problem, really, isn't it? So, well, I mean, we have to commit to having the possibility of this happening, but for sure, it's not nice when it happens.
Yeah, jokes on us really for being F1 fans and being stuck with Codemasters as glitches. But yeah, my race was quite eventful at Singapore because obviously, as I said, disconnected between qualifying and the race. So took back control of my car after the sort of the start of the race, fought my way back up, and then I know me, Carl, and I can't remember who the third driver was, had a bit of an incident. So I just overtaken Carl, coming onto sort of like the main straight, the main overtaking place, and then he went for a move on the inside, which I left him enough room, but then there was another car on the inside of him, so we sort of had a coming together and went into the wall, which dropped me positions, and then there was a safety car, and then I think after the safety car restart I tried getting past Lundy around sort of turn 1, 2, 3, and it was only like a slight bit of contact, but it was enough to knock a bit more wing off. So then I came into pit again, and there was another safety car, and then I managed to, I don't even know how I got back up the field, but I think with people disconnecting that obviously helped. But yeah, I know Dave had a few connection issues, which sucks, but you know, there's not really a lot we can do about it. And then we kind of move on to the end of the season, where we went to Russia first, and that was a bit of a mad race because I had a bad start, and I think, was it Brenda, Hopi, and I want to say Michael were out in front?
I definitely know it's Hopi. I can't remember
Oh
who
no,
else it was.
I think it was you two were out in front, and then there was a battle behind, and it was like Michael, Ali, me, and Jaeger, I think, were like 4 cars squabbling over stuff. So you and Hope had bought that quite a lead, and then I came into pit early and did like a 3 or 4 lap undercut and managed to jump everyone, to then go and take on the win, which was quite a good strategy for me. Not to like blow my own trumpet or whatever. But how did everyone else's Russia go? Because Billy again scoring points, Tez having a decent race.
Yeah, for me, that was my race of the season. I love Russia as a track. It's an odd one. I think a lot of people, I don't want to say hate, but dislike Russia as a track due to it's almost like a street circuit. There's not a lot of overtaking opportunities and things like that. But yeah, I had a horrible qualifying and started 17th or lower even maybe, and then managed to secure 10th on the final lap of the race along with fastest lap. So for me, taking fastest lap against some of the drivers that have been competing in this tier was a big thing for me. So yeah, I loved that race. It was almost like I'd won. Sort of, you've got Brenda, who's won races, and then celebrating, and then me celebrating just as much for a P10 with fastest lap. So
Yeah, well, like you said, the sort of skill gap for this season wasn't quite, I don't want to say even, but if you know what I mean. So obviously it's a great result to get fastest lap. I know there's quite a few drivers who got fastest lap and probably celebrated it like a win, because obviously with me and Brenda, it's quite difficult to win, and you need, you know, outside circumstances for it to happen. But still, a great result taking fastest lap, and Tez having another decent race.
Yeah, it's probably quite a common position I finished throughout the season, finishing P6. Funnily enough, we actually finished in the championship at the end. Not really a lot to say about the race, to be honest. I mean, I think it was quite a boring race from what I remember, because I don't remember much. So yeah, I think it was just one of them races where you sort of got on with it and just sort of had my own race. But I do like the track. Like Jubilee said, not a lot of people do like the track. It's kind of quite a controversial track, but I like the flow of the track. To be fair, it's a decent one. But not, like I said, not really a lot to speak about the track, though, I must say.
Yeah, I do remember from top 10 moments there was a nice move that you made in that sort of middle sector going around the outside, before the second straight. That was a nice move that you made. because I think the two in front of you were battling.
Yeah, that's right. I also remember having a really good battle with Paz as well. Me and Paz had a great battle that race, and that's I think looking back now, it was a good battle I had with him. Actually staying ahead of him the whole time. I don't think I picked up penalties. That race, whereas he did. And I was ahead of him the whole race, and then it was on the last lap he passed me, but then I ended up beating him anyway on penalties. So yeah, I think looking back now, there was a good few points to mention from that.
Yeah, and I mean, not getting penalties is an achievement around any track, especially Russia, because I feel like it's with not really having curbs that really affect you, it's so much more inviting to try and cut the corners to gain time. But now moving on to Japan and USA, both had the potential to be exciting dry races, but ended up being wet races, which I know Brynda wasn't very happy about. Although normally, I mean, I did go on to win both of them, but Brynda through Japan especially was very close the whole race, which I don't think was something you expected.
No, not at all. Russia, my first race, turning off traction control, which was an achievement in itself. Still picking up a podium, which, to be fair, after turning off that assist, I think was pretty good. And then, as you say, in Japan, wet race, which was very difficult. And my first race in the wet without traction control. And I think I remember when I had my interviews, the commentators were wondering if I would have turned it back on, which I was thinking about myself when going into it. But I decided that if I was going to turn it off, I was going to turn it off for good. So I eventually just braved it, and I just got quicker and quicker and quicker throughout the entire race, sort of building up confidence with the traction. And yeah, I mean, I didn't win the race, but to me it was a bit of a win that I was able to at least keep with the king of the wet. So I was quite happy with it.
Yeah, and I noticed as well from this little block from Italy to Japan, I didn't realise this, but it was the same podium. Well, not the same podium, but the same people on the podium. It was always me, Brynda, and Hopi. So good racing from all of us to keep it on the podium for 4 consecutive races. And then yeah, USA was a bit of a different story to Japan. Wasn't there an issue with a safety car at some point, I want to say? Or maybe I'm wrong with Brynda.
I think I got a. Did I get a drive through?
Yeah, because I feel like you dropped down the pack and then came back through.
Yeah, because that was the race which me and Brynda were in a party by ourselves for, and we both picked up drive-throughs after the virtual safety car. Were lucky enough. You served your drive-through penalty, and then the safety car came out. And then as I was going into the pit lane to serve mine, the safety car came out, and so I ended up going through the into the pit lane, but they pitted me rather than serving my drive-through. And then we all had to join up behind the safety car, and then I had to serve it again, if that makes sense. So
yeah, that's super annoying.
Difficult race.
And yeah, I think personally I didn't want it to rain because I feel like it would have been a better race in the dry. But it is what it is, and we just had to deal with it. And then looking on to Mexico, which saw the championship wrapped up, but it was wrapped up in a good way because me and Brynda had one last final good battle before it was all over.
Yeah, I think, like I said in the interviews, I think it was the perfect way to round out the championship, with both of us just battling throughout the entire race, right to the end, with the smallest of margins for a gap. between first and second. Yeah, I think it was just very fitting. I don't think it was quite as good as our France battle, but it was close to that.
Yeah, definitely, and at least it wasn't just a straight race to victory. It was a good battle, and pretty much all not quite side by side all throughout the race, but still a decent battle nonetheless. And then let me just look back at the standings. So we had Hopey back on the podium as well. How did Mexico go for you two, Billy and Taz?
For me, so and so. I like the track. I really do like the track. To be fair, it's a really nice flowing track. However, it doesn't really suit my penalty situation. Picking up, I think it was, well, by looking at the stats, a very whopping 18 penalties, 18 seconds worth of penalties. So yeah, really not good. I think without the penalties, I could have been pushing for a higher position. Not quite sure how Hope you managed to not pick up any penalties. That's huge. Not picking up a penalty around Mexico. It's arguably the hardest track on the calendar not to pick up penalties. Hope you've done a very good job there. But for me, for my performance, started 7th, finished 7th, bang average race.
For me, it was a bit of a different race, really. Started again quite low down. Was making really good progress through the pack. Overtakes haven't been my strongest point. I always seem to have held back a bit, but I sort of halfway through the season when it wasn't working out, sort of went sod it. Started sending it a bit more, and that's when the results came back. I made it into the top tens video with an overtake that I made, and then right as I was coming around the final corner, pressed my brake pedal, and it snapped clean off. So sort of ended up halfway along the track not knowing what had happened because it just literally fell off on my foot, and then caused a little bit of a pile up and think someone might have taken damage off me as I was pulling to the side when they just sort of caught my rear end as I was trying to get off the track and slow down without a brake.
Yeah, that's
So yeah,
such a shame because, especially if you're having a good race up until then, it's annoying when equipment fails you. But I suppose that's something that we don't have that the real life F1 does have. But yeah, annoying as it is, still, getting used to that will. I mean, I still think it's great that you were, although you say you were sort of like lower midfield, the fact that you've still been able to battle people and it's only your first season, it's just
yeah,
it's a good place, good starting point.
yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to the next season when it's a bit more, I want to say equal.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And then moving on to our last two races of the season, Mr. Brinder taking wins in both at Brazil and Abu Dhabi. How did the final two races go for you?
Brazil, I think, definitely a lot more difficult than Abu Dhabi. Brazil, obviously, we had like sort of intermediate qualifying, although it kind of felt like those conditions where it was too wet for dries. But yeah, you know what I mean. I can't think of what I was gonna say now. So it was just those horrible conditions where just no tire felt right, and you couldn't really set anything competitive. Obviously, those who put on sort of an intermediate setup between like dry and wet managed to put in some good laps. And it was also our first race back after the 2 week break. So my excuses is that I was a little bit rusty to start off with, and that I was running a completely dry setup. But in the race, I started sixth and managed to get up to second before the end of the first lap, and then took first at the start of the second lap, and then just, I think, led the rest of the race, which I was quite happy with. And then Abu Dhabi managed to get pole, and then led from almost from start to finish. The guys who started on the mediums, the only people sort of getting ahead of me, including Mr. Tez being ahead, and I had to overtake him at one point, which was quite fun. But yeah, two good races from my perspective. Obviously, it was a bit sort of I don't want to say easier. Obviously, no disrespect to any of the other drivers. Dave was hassling me quite hard in Brazil until obviously his connection completely just threw him out of it. But with my championship rival switching from pad to wheel, it was a bit easier for me.
Yeah, we'll touch on me in a little bit, but we'll go to Billy first. Abu Dhabi wasn't, I don't think, probably the best race for you, but Brazil, P12, again, probably pretty standard, just with some of the quicker people just being only just ahead, but probably another decent result.
Yeah, I feel I got unlucky with the rain for that one in the quali. Previously, in time trials and doing a lot of practice, but practice a bit in the wet, but was just praying it would have been a dry quali, and set a time that was only 1/10 off Tez's best, and then going into the wet just completely messed it up on that quali. So started 18th, might have even been 19th, I think, and then worked my way back up through because it was a half dry race, and then was it all dry or did it rain at the start? I can't remember if I'm completely honest. Brazil.
Well,
Was it a dry?
It rained at the end.
Yeah, rained at the end. Sorry, it rained at the end. I know it was wet at some point, and made my way back up through. I was running P8 with I think 7 laps to go. Then when the rain started, it just sort of went downhill for me. I picked up a penalty. I think I picked up 2 penalties, and then Riceman caught me, sort of another wet specialist, along with Josh. A lot of his good results came in the wet. And then having a really close battle, and we both went into turn 1. Neither of us wanted to give up the place, and I just caught my front wing, went on to yellowy, orangey wing damage, and then just dropped to the rest of the places that I lost in those final few laps, just having no grip.
Yeah, tough. Sort of tough end of the season even. But still, shame that the rain came when it did in Brazil. As Brindy alluded to earlier, I did change from pad to wheel, which for the first stint at Brazil I was feeling quite good, even though I had wing damage. The car felt pretty good, and then I pitted onto hards and spun coming out the pits and just had no grip. And Brazil was a write off, and then Abu Dhabi, just to touch on quickly, it was definitely a better race. I felt like I had more pace. At one point of the race, I felt like I could have even got maybe a podium, maybe 4th or 5th. But then a safety car came out at the wrong time, basically bunched up the pack, and then I had Riceman behind who put on an opportunistic move coming into the hotel section, and it was unlucky the angle that our wheels touched, but I then spun, and with only a few laps left to go I couldn't really do much. So not the way I wanted to start my wheel racing career, if you want to put it that way. But I can't really complain because the rest of the season has been pretty good. But now finishing up with Tez's last 2 races, quite a crucial last 2 races because the Drivers' Championship was all sorted out, but there was a right old battle for 5th.
Yeah, there was the tensions are running high. It was really make or break. but especially between sort of me, Alistair, and Lundy. More so between me and Lundy. Obviously, going back to what I said earlier about how obviously we're the owners and best mates in real life. So obviously he beat me in the mini series, so I was determined to make sure I beat him this time round. I wasn't looking likely. Obviously, at the start of the season, I spent the whole time ahead of him, and it sort of around the midway toward the end, he was ahead of me the whole time. So I knew going into Brazil, I felt strong, I felt confident. I had the setup right, the strategy was right. However, I predicted the rain to come out sooner than what it came out, and that eventually resulted into a blowout. And when I got that blowout, I thought, that's it. That's it. That's over. Starting P8, finishing P8. Nothing really to say about that race apart from huge mistake from me. I should have pitted when Lundy pitted, and I could have maybe challenged for 5th or 6th. Then going into Abu Dhabi, I think there was 10 points separating me and Lundy, so I knew I had to do something pretty mad. Was it 10 points? It might have been. I can't remember how many. I think it might have been. I can't remember now.
8 or 9?
But I think
something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I think I needed to get like P5, and he needed to get no points or something. So yeah, I knew it was so unlikely to be able to do it. All I knew was I just had to get on with it. Having very little practice, I just did a few time trial laps before we jumped in. Obviously, me saying that clearly states that I didn't have any faith in myself, to be honest. But I actually found I quite like Abu Dhabi. Didn't get the position I wanted in qualifying. I tried to qualify in the mediums, was outside the top 10, and then the hot lap I did do on the softs, I literally lagged going to turn 1, so I knew that was a write-off. Starting P11, and then obviously having the race restart as well due to a driver readying up meant that was all on fresh tyres, and I didn't know if that was good or not for myself, but thinking about it now, I think it was, because that allowed me to do that longer stint on the mediums to ensure I do the one stop very cleanly and without too much problems. I took the lead of the race after Brindy pitted for the softs. I stood out in the mediums, and on lap 17 I decided to pit, and then it wasn't until lap 18 that safety car came out. So maybe pitting a lap later could have helped me, but I came in the pits in P3 when Brindy and Alistair both overtook me, and then came out in P3 when the safety car came. So obviously everyone jumped in the pits, Brindy being one of them, Alistair as well. And I've already made my pit stop by I had a lap older tyres than everybody else, but still came out my P3. So it could have been worse. I've been in that position before where I lose out big time, but it wasn't too bad in Abu Dhabi. And then it was a case of just trying to keep my head down. And I was battling off Jägerbomb for a little while. Alistair sort of went off in the distance, so I just knew I just needed to sort of keep my P3. And then made a gap behind me, and the gap in front of me was too far. But I took my second podium assist of the season and not even pick up a warning. So that was I was pretty impressed with my drive, picking up no warnings. And then it came down to race wins, which Alistair beat me on. So Alistair took P5, I took P6, and beat Lundy by 1 point, and he finished P7. So it was really, really close for sure.
Yeah, pretty, I would imagine, not stressful, but I'm trying to think of the word. Exciting way to end the season, knowing that there's potentially P5 on the board, P6, and it's also tight in that sort of P5 to P7 range. But yeah, we had a couple of those throughout the field where people were only separated by 1 point. But that has been sort of the overview. I'm just going to run through the drivers quickly. So we had myself in first, Brenda in P2, Hopi P3, Michael P4, and then Ali obviously joining halfway through, picking up the 2 wins in P5. Tez joined P5, but obviously P6 because of Ali's wins. Lundy P7, just a point behind the 2 of them. Dave doing incredible to only be 17 points off of 5th for joining halfway through. So shout out to him. Riceman in P9, just narrowly beaten out Yeagbon for P10. And then we have Pars P11, Carl Duncan P12, Curry P13, Hayes P14, Simper P15, Smithy P16, Tubilly in 17th, just beating Stanth by 1 point, Stanth in 18th, and then Knoll in 19th, and Hoof Penguin bringing up the Tier 1 standings. And then also we had Red Bull considering getting the Constructors' Championship, which is obviously well done to Brindy and Lundy for getting over 500 points. Absolute madness there from the Red Bull drivers. And just quickly to finish off, what are your guys' best race / best drive? It could be a race that you've had yourself, a race that someone else had, or a drive that someone else had. Why don't we start with Tez?
I feel like obviously both the podiums are going to be my favourites. Obviously being up on the podium. I feel like Spain was my better performance and my better result. Although Abu Dhabi not picking up any penalties, or any warnings, in fact, was pretty amazing. But to be fair, I did put a lot of work into Spain. I think that was the most I practiced for a league race. Nailed the strategy. If it wasn't obviously for that safety car, maybe things could have been a little bit different. But yeah, that was probably my best and my best performance.
Brinda, what was your best race or best drive? It could be someone else, yourself. If you want to talk about your Britain strategy win, what was your best race and best drive?
I wouldn't actually. I don't think I had any amazing sort of drives myself. I would actually like to go for someone else's drive, which I think was a bit underrated, a bit overshadowed, which was Hopi actually in France. I'm pretty sure he finished third that race. I'm pretty sure he put it on pole, and he did the 2-stop, whereas you and I did the 1-stop and managed to pull out a huge gap. But he actually did a 2-stop, soft, medium, and managed to still get the podium, which to me I was I was very surprised by. So to be honest, I think that was a very good drive from him, and one that was sort of overlooked a little bit, but I think should be mentioned.
Billy, what about you? What are your best race and best drive?
Yeah, for me, obviously my personal best drive, even though it wasn't my highest position, was Russia. I just felt I gave everything that race, and I couldn't have done any more, even if I tried. But for best race, I'd probably have to go for Spain. Even though I DNF'd that, the battles up and down were so mixed in terms of the skill level that people were racing against. I mean, at one point after your disconnection, I was battling you for 2 or 3 laps. I think you took me into turn 8, and then I think you went just too deep, and I managed to then take the position back again. But then even after I DNF'd, it was like a race that you couldn't look away from, just looking up and down the grid for all the battles that were going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best race of the season was was Spain, because I think it had so much action throughout the pack. I know that there was one point where I think there was Rice, Lindy, and I'll say Carl were battling through Sector 3. Obviously, we had last couple lap antics for the win. So I think that's probably the best race. And then my best drive I'm going to give to Carl Duncan at Netherlands, because he scored some points at the start of the season, but it was a bit like you, Billy. I'm sure you probably raced him quite a lot, where you're sort of just outside the top 10, and for him to get a good strategy and to get a podium, I think is it was excellent for him. Probably boosted his confidence loads, and yeah, I think there are so many drivers that have done well this season. I think all of the drivers have performed outstandingly, and it's been a great first season for TTM. Do you guys have any last thoughts before we finish?
No, not from me.
I think we've pretty much covered everything. But yeah, it's been a really eventful season, a really exciting season, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the guys in TTM can produce for season 2.
I think we've pretty much, as the other two have said, I think we've covered pretty much everything, to be fair. I think it was a great season for everyone. Obviously, the championship fight was very good for the two of us. And yeah, just looking forward to going into next season.
Alright, well that has been the second edition of TTM Talks. We all hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much, Tez, for coming on and being a guest.
No, thank you. Thank you.
And thank you again to my two lovely co-hosts. Yeah, we just hope you're all staying safe. You know, we know it's tough times at the moment with lockdown and everything. And hopefully through TTM, whether it's participating, watching the races on Twitch, top 10 moments, TTM Talks, whatever it is, we hope that we're brightening up your day a little bit. So we hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week, where we'll talk about the Tier 2 Championship, I think that's what's on the agenda for next week. Maybe have some Tier 2 guests on as well to get their perspective from it. But that's been it for today. We'll see you next time.